Good evening, everybody. It is an honor to welcome you here on behalf of Frankfurter Buchmesse. My name is John Steinmark. I've had the great pleasure of working together with various esteemed organizations and individuals in assembling our cultural and political program of this year's Buchmesse, which we have given the title Frankfurt Calling, Perspectives on Culture and Politics. With this program, we want to express our desire to invite and to bring together thinkers, authors, translators, publishers, agents, anyone who's really interested in intellectual exchange here in Frankfurt to discuss with us some of the challenges that we collectively face as a human family today. And this event, which we are participating in right now, certainly is a highlight of this program. And I would like to extend my gratitude to everybody at Penguin Random House, New Institute, DTV Verlag, Goethe-Universität, Süddeutsche Zeitung for this great team effort in making it happen. Thank you so much. Nexus mit Systemsturz in die Zukunft, Nexus into the future with a system crash. This title already conjures up a lot of images. On the one hand, we seem ever more connected around the globe, which in theory should make it easier for us to coordinate efforts to improve our situation on this planet. On the other hand, multiple crises seem to accelerate in such a rapid way that it puts us in a situation comparable to the 1994 thriller movie Speed. I don't know if you've seen this movie or if you remember, but the basic premise goes something like this. A Los Angeles city bus is rigged in such a way that it will explode if it drives slower than 50 miles per hour. That's 80 kilometers per hour. So if it slows down, it's going to explode. But at the same time, driving at such a speed for such a prolonged period of time will also most certainly lead to catastrophe. While Hollywood has Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves to tackle this issue, we have Yuval Noah Harari and Kohei Saito. Jokes aside, we feel deeply honored to have these two intellectuals here in Frankfurt today to provide a stage for their exchange of ideas, and we're very much looking forward to hearing from them. And with this, I'd like to pass the stage to Yuval Noah Harari, Kohei Saito, and our moderators of the evening, Meredith Haaf and Jens-Christian Rabe. I wish us all an inspiring and thought-provoking evening, and thank you so much for being here.
Herzlich willkommen. Wie schön, dass Sie alle da sind, auch so zahlreich zu dieser Veranstaltung. Weil ich Sie eigentlich auch beglückwünschen möchte, denn es geht um alles. Wir fangen auf Deutsch an, werden das Gespräch dann auf Englisch führen. Ich nehme an, einige von Ihnen werden auch entsprechende technische Gerätschaften haben, um dem Gespräch auf Deutsch dann zu folgen. Ein paar Worte zum Beginn. Also es geht um alles, die Zukunft der Menschheit, jetzt hier gleich. Für diese Zukunft werden, so viel scheint inzwischen sicher, zwei Entwicklungen entscheidend sein, die auf je unterschiedliche Art Anlass zu großer Sorge geben. Die Klimakrise und die atemberaubend schnellen Entwicklungen von KI-Anwendungen aller Art. Über die Gründe für die Sorgen, vor allem aber auch über einige interessante Lösungsideen wollen wir sprechen, und zwar mit Kohei Saito. Er wurde, ja, bitte. Ein paar Worte zu Kohei. Er wurde 1987 geboren, promovierte 2016 an der Berliner Humboldt-Uni und ist inzwischen Professor für Philosophie an der Universität Tokio sowie derzeit Fellow am Hamburger New Institute, das sich der Erforschung der Zukunft der Demokratie verschrieben hat und diese Veranstaltung dankenswerterweise mit organisiert hat. Sein Buch zum Thema, dieses hier, erschien auf Deutsch 2023 und verkaufte sich aber im Original einige Jahre vorher in Japan sagenhafte 500.000 Mal. Das heißt Systemsturz, der Sieg der Natur über den Kapitalismus. Es geht darin exakt um das, was der Titel verspricht, den Sturz des Kapitalismus oder vielmehr darum, warum Kohei Saito es nicht für möglich hält, die existenziell bedrohlichen Klima- und Umweltprobleme, die uns der Kapitalismus eingebrockt hat, kapitalistisch oder innerhalb eines kapitalistischen, also auf permanentes Wachstum gepolten Systems zu lösen. Er schreibt in dem Buch, sollten wir weiter versuchen, den Kapitalismus am Leben zu erhalten, sind wir angesichts des Chaos, das die Klimakrise mit sich bringt, zum Rückfall in die Barbarei verdammt. Im argumentativen Kern geht es Saito um die gigantischen Kosten des Kapitalismus als, er nennt es, imperiale Lebensweise, die nicht nur die Menschen, sondern auch die Natur in unverantwortlicher Weise ausbeutet. Seine Idee für eine künftige alternative Ordnung entwickelt Kohei im Buch im Rückgriff auf Karl Marx und nennt sie Degrowth-Kommunismus. Darüber werden wir gleich reden. Erstmal, welcome Kohei Saito.
Yeah.
Thank you so
much.
Good to have you.
It's really crazy. Is my voice out? Is this out?
No, it's on.
Okay. Now it's on. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. It's really such a great honor to be with Yuval Harari. I'm a basically unknown Japanese crazy Marxist guy advocating for degrowth, and then I don't look as good as Keanu Reeves, but maybe I can convince you that degrowth communism is the only way to save the world. Yeah, looking forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Kohei. Also hallo, guten Abend, auch von mir. Schön, dass Sie da sind. Mein Name ist Meredith Haaf. Ich bin im Meinungsressort der Süddeutschen Zeitung und ich darf Ihnen unseren zweiten Gast vorstellen, obwohl ich den meisten von Ihnen wahrscheinlich gar nicht groß vorstellen muss. Er ist Historiker, Philosoph und der Autor des Millionen-Bestsellers SAPIENS, eine kurze Geschichte der Menschheit, sowie des ebenfalls weltweiten Bestsellers Homo Deus und dann noch ein paar andere Bücher. Er ist 1979 in Haifa geboren und ist Professor an der Hebräischen Universität Jerusalem und in Cambridge. Nexus, eine kurze Geschichte der Informationsnetzwerke von der Steinzeit bis zur künstlichen Intelligenz, kurz wohlgedacht, ist vor wenigen Wochen bei Penguin erschienen. Und man kann, glaube ich, sagen, dass es schon jetzt dabei ist, das internationale Gespräch über unseren Informationsalltag, über die Datenwirtschaft, aber vor allem auch über unser aller Verhältnis zur sogenannten künstlichen Intelligenz grundlegend zu verändern. Was jetzt genau in dem Buch drinsteht, werden wir gleich besprechen. Das ist jedenfalls ein Buch, das mit seinen Thesen teilweise schon auf große Zustimmung stößt, aber auch mitunter auf Widerwillen oder sogar Widerstand. Und anders kennt man es auch nicht von Yuval Noah Harari. Willkommen, Yuval. Welcome, Yuval.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ich sage jetzt auch noch ganz kurz etwas zum Ablauf. Christian Rabe hat es ja eben schon erwähnt, wir wechseln jetzt gleich auf der Bühne ins Englische, werden uns hier so eine Dreiviertelstunde etwa unterhalten. Und dann haben wir noch zwei weitere Gäste, die wir dann auf die Bühne bitten. Sie sind beide Studierende der Goethe-Universität Frankfurt und auch sie haben Fragen mitgebracht. Lassen Sie sich dann einfach überraschen. Okay, jetzt wechseln wir. So, Yuval, thank you for being here. The first thing we would like to do now is just to talk about some of the main arguments that you put forth in Nexus. So I would like to start with a quote by one of your many famous readers, the former president of the USA, Barack Obama. And this quote appears in your book, at the beginning of the book. I'm sorry I can't do it in an Obama voice. I would really like to be able to. So he said, I am a big believer in technology, and I'm a big believer in openness when it comes to the flow of information. I think that the more freely information flows, the stronger a society becomes. We'll talk about where and when he said that, because that's actually makes a difference when you think about the quote. But to you, what does this quote express?
I think it's part of a very naive view of information. Again, in the context in which it was said, the meaning was somewhat different. But generally speaking, the idea that you just flood the world with more information and the results will necessarily be good, which is an idea which is very common today in places like Silicon Valley, just ignores thousands of years of human history. It assumes that information is truth, and information is the raw material of knowledge and wisdom, and this is simply not the case. Most information is junk. Most information, even if it's not junk, it's not the truth. It's fictions and fantasies. Sometimes it's propaganda. Sometimes it's lies. Because the truth is costly and rare. It takes a lot of effort and research to produce a truthful account, whereas fiction is very cheap. The truth is often complicated because reality is complicated. Fiction can be as simple as you would like it to be. The truth is sometimes painful and unattractive. Fiction can be made as flattering as you would like it to be. So in a completely kind of free market of information, the truth will sink to the bottom under this flood of other information. Maybe to give just one example of what I'm talking about, if you think about visual information, like portraits or images. So what is the most common portrait in the world? What is the most famous face in human history? This is the face of Jesus, the portrait of Jesus. Billions of portraits of Jesus have been created over the last 2,000 years, almost everywhere, in churches, cathedrals, private homes, schools, government offices, and 100% of them are fictions. Not a single one is truthful or authentic, because we have just no idea how the man looked like. There are no surviving portraits from his own lifetime, if anybody even bothered to make a portrait at the time. And in the Bible, there is not a single word about how he looked like. Not a single, like for all the people who now imagine Jesus in their heads, not a single word in the Bible, whether he was tall or short, thin or fat, whether he had black hair or blonde hair or was bald, we have no idea. So all this information is not the truth. Nevertheless, it can be very useful. I mean, the function of most information, what it does is to connect things. And these portraits of Jesus were part of the information that created one of the most powerful information networks in history, the Christian religion, which connected billions of people over the entire world for centuries. Of course, what you do with these networks, the networks are powerful. You can use them for good, to inspire charity and compassion, to establish hospitals and help the poor. You can use them for bad, to launch inquisitions and crusades and holy wars and preach hatred. But the key thing about information is that it only connects. If you want to get at the truth, at knowledge, at wisdom, you need to make a much bigger effort than just produce more information. And maybe one last thing I'll say about it is that contrary to what we might expect, the truth often hides in silence, not in information. That the truth and knowledge and wisdom often hide behind silence and even boredom. That you need to cross a desert of boredom or a swamp of boredom often in order to get to knowledge and wisdom. And one of the things I've learned, with talking with high-tech titans and politicians and so forth, is that people who don't have time to be bored very rarely get to hear or come up with really new insights, because they come out very often of boredom and silence.
Mm-hmm. So in a way, we're sort of informing ourselves to death.
Yes, I mean, you can also compare it to food.
Mm-hmm.
That the same way that we need food diets, we need information diets.
Mm-hmm.
And the same way that with food, that it's not, if you want a healthy body, it's not enough to eat. You also need to digest.
Mm-hmm.
So also with information, it's not enough to put more in. If you don't have time to digest the information and also to detoxify some of the junk that gets in, this is not the way to gain real knowledge.
So as the master of brief histories, take us through the steps that humankind took in order to get to this point where we are so over-satiated with information and stories and images. How did we get there? Like, what are the key points?
So again, very briefly, if you go back 100,000 years, so people can cooperate only in very small numbers of, hunter-gatherer bands of maybe 50 people, 100 people. All of them know each other personally. They are family or friends. There is almost no cooperation with strangers and foreigners because there is no communication with them, and you cannot establish trust. Over these 100,000 years, we have managed to establish the largest cooperation networks this planet has ever seen. You look today at some nations, like China and India, have 1.4 billion citizens. If you look at the World Trade Network that provides us with most of the food we eat and the shoes that we wear and these glasses and these chairs, where did they come from? Maybe they came from the other side of the world. Complete strangers, not even citizens of the same country, but still cooperate in this immense network of cooperation, which runs on information. How do you get strangers to cooperate? The strings, the ties that tie them together are made of information. So it could be portraits of Jesus, it could be banknotes or money. I mean, probably the most successful story ever told, and successful in terms of connecting people, is not any religion, but money. It's the only story that everybody shares. Like even, people who are the political enemies of the United States are still happy to have US dollars. And if you look at the US itself, I just came from there, so Republicans and Democrats are unable to agree on anything at all. The last remaining thread that holds the American Republic together, the last story that everybody still believes, is the dollar. Republicans and Democrats still agree on the value of the dollar. And again, this is, of course, a complete fiction. Money doesn't represent anything in reality. It's not even a question to ask, is it true or not? Mm-hmm. Because the dollar doesn't pretend to represent something out there in reality. And what most information does, people think information represents reality. There is reality out there, and information is something that represents reality. And I ask, is this a good representation? Is it true? But most information doesn't try to do that. The dollar doesn't represent anything. It creates a new reality. You tell people a story, this green piece of paper, and today most dollars and most money is just digital data in computers. But you tell them a story that this green piece of paper is worth, has the same value, let's say, as a banana, and you can go to a complete stranger, give them this piece of paper that nobody can eat or drink or do anything with, and you get food that you can actually eat in return. So I would say the greatest storytellers in the world, they just gave the Nobel Prize in Literature. I think the greatest storytellers are not the people who win the Nobel Prize in literature, but the people who win the Nobel Prize in economics. And I guess we'll hear more about that later. That they tell the really powerful stories that connect people. Again, whether connection is good or bad depends what you do with it.
Another very powerful storyteller in the 20th century was Steve Jobs. And I want to go back to the year 2009 because that was when Barack Obama said this quote that we had. And 2009 was 2 years after the release of the first iPhone. So we've gotten used to these Apple presentations, iPhone presentations. They're almost like holy mass for tech believers. So in a way, maybe that is like the biggest story of the 21st century. And 2009 was 12 years after Google launched its extremely successful search engine for the internet. So these two events, what have they made us?
Well, you know, the promise when Google launched the search engine, when the iPhone was launched, the promise that here we are presenting humanity with the most sophisticated information technology in history, that it will speed up the production and the spread of information, and that this will result in spreading truth and freedom and democracy and peace. And all these promises in 2024 now sound extremely hollow because we know what actually happened. I mean, only the first part of the promise was realized. We did get the most sophisticated information technology in history, but we didn't get any of the other goods. And just the contrary. Now we have this paradox that we have the most sophisticated information technology in history, and people can't talk with each other anymore. Or at least maybe they can talk, but nobody listens. That the conversation is breaking down. I was referring to the US. The democracy is a conversation. You know, dictatorship is a dictate. One person dictates everything. Democracy is a conversation, people coming together to decide what to do. And in the US, it's no longer possible to have a rational political conversation. And the same thing is happening in almost all the democracies around the world. You go to one country after the other, they tell you the same thing. People can no longer have a rational conversation. So this is the big paradox that we have some explanations for, but this is the key question. If you meet, again, one of these tech titans, or one of the people who make all these promises, this is the simple question to ask. So what's your explanation? How is it that with the most sophisticated technology, humans are losing the ability to hold a conversation?
So what's the answer? What do they answer when you meet them?
They try to deflect the blame
of course.
to somebody else or to something else. I mean, the best, we don't know for sure. I mean, again, part of the job of scholars is also to say we don't know for sure. The best, a part of the problem we do know, it's the algorithms. That we gave control of the human conversation to non-human intelligence. That we are now in the midst of one of the biggest information revolutions in history with the rise of social media. Over the last 10, 20 years, billions of people shifted to spending hours every day on these new platforms. They became the main source of news. They became the main way for political mobilization. They became the main way for social organization. There is immense value in that. There are enormous positive potential in that, but there is also immense danger, which we saw with every previous revolution in information technology, that when you change the basic ways that people communicate and organize, there is an earthquake in society. And this is what we are now experiencing. But contrary to every previous information revolution, this time we have non-human intelligence in the driver's seat. Because if you ask who manages the conversation on the most important platforms today in the world, on Twitter, on TikTok, on Facebook, on YouTube, and all these places, it's no longer human editors, like in newspapers or radio station or television stations. It's algorithms. It's AIs. This was the first real encounter between humanity and AI. It happened already more than 10 years ago. The algorithms that manage social media are very primitive AIs, but still, and these very primitive AIs were enough to destabilize basically all the democracies on Earth and all societies on Earth. Because as the way that they have managed the conversation between the humans privileges something called engagement. The goal that was given to the algorithms was increase user engagement. Now, engagement sounds like a good thing. Who doesn't want to be engaged? Like you buy a book, you want to be engaged. You wonder whether you should sign an author to publish their book. Would this book be engaging to the public? But the word engagement, there is something sinister hiding behind it, or at least the way that it was interpreted by the social media algorithms. They basically took the whole of human nature and reduced it to this single ingredient, single metric of engagement. Hate and love, it's the same thing. The only question is how long are they engaged? An hour of hate is better than 30 minutes of love because it's an hour of engagement versus 30 minutes of engagement. So all human emotions were filtered into a single word, engagement. That's it. And there was a business logic behind it. The more people are engaged, that means the more time they spend on the platform, the more advertisements you can show them, the more data you can harvest, and the company's stock goes up and the company becomes richer. And in pursuit of engagement, the algorithm experimented on millions of human guinea pigs and discovered something which was actually discovered also centuries before by human beings, but this time the algorithms discovered it, that the easiest way to grab human attention, to keep people engaged, is to press the hate button or the greed button or the fear button in the mind. And this is what they have been doing for the last 15 or 20 years. And this is maybe not the whole answer, but a big part of the answer for why is the conversation collapsing, because we are too engaged. We really need more boring conversations on this planet.
And it's also... also a question of corporate power, and I think that's something that Kohei has something to say about.
I think so, but maybe one last question from me. I'm imagining you telling all this, the tech titans. What do you think they want from you? And do you think they understand?
I think they understand better than most people, maybe. Many of them, not all of them, but many of them are thoughtful people. They have at least good intentions. They have done a lot of good in the world also. We don't need to adopt this kind of one-sided view of reality. It's all black, it's all white, it's all good, it's all... I mean, reality is complex. I met my husband online in one of the first social media websites 22 years ago. So I'm grateful for the engineers that created this social media platform back in 2002. So there was also, again, a lot of value in this. And the question is how to make it better, how to design it better, and not how to completely get rid of it. And I think at least some of them are very concerned, but they are caught in a trap, partly of their own doing, partly the doing of market forces. And the trap is that they often say in these conversations, we would actually like to slow down. We would even like to kind of reduce engagement and have a more boring world. But if we slow down and our competitors don't, they win the race. And then the bad guys win. Like, we are the good guys. We are talking to you. You can hear that we want to do the right thing, right? So we are the good guys. But our competitors on the other side of the valley or on the other side of the Pacific Ocean, they will not slow down. So we have to run faster to make sure that the good guys win the race. And everybody is saying the same thing. And the big paradox, I think, of the present moment is basically what they are saying is we cannot trust the other humans, but we think we'll be able to trust the AIs. Because again, the race we are talking about, social media is old news. The new news is AI. The race to create AI, and especially AGI, artificial general intelligence. And the big question if we create an alien intelligence on this planet, which is in a way more intelligent than us, could we still trust it? So the same people who say we cannot trust the other humans are also the same people who say we think we'll be able to trust this alien intelligence.
That sounds completely nuts, having in mind what you said before. Mm-hmm. So what do you think when you leave this conversation?
That it's again, they are not nuts. It's a very difficult dilemma. It's easy to dismiss it out of hand when it's and just kind of blame them for being stupid. But to really solve problems in the world, I think we need a more charitable and generous attitude towards people and their problem, including the most powerful people in the world.
That's very interesting because that's what we're talking about, well, in some minutes. Let me introduce or have a talk with
I hate Elon Musk, but Marx says that we don't criticize capitalists, we criticize capitalist systems. So yeah, let's talk about the system side.
Yeah, what I was thinking was, Yuval said the truth hides behind huge piles of boredom. That's what you said before. What's a Marxist comment on this? Well, given that Marx Engels' Werk is, in a way, hugely boring sometimes.
But the problem of the money, I found it very interesting. And it's very important that the money is really not representing the reality. Money creates new kind of fiction. This fiction is money can be invested, it can be increased, and then it can be reinvested, it can grow and grow and grow. And then someday this growth will bring about prosperity to all of us. But what happened in the reality side? Reality is that our world is on fire. We are totally overshooting the ecological limit. In the past 12 months, we are overshooting the 1.5 degrees Celsius. So many problems happening: wildfires, drought, flood, hurricanes. But these are just the beginning of the ecological breakdown that we are going to experience in the next decades and so. This will just not end with this natural disaster. It will bring about food shortages, water scarcity, more accelerating inflation everywhere, meaning that even wider economic inequality, which is already quite problematic. Those scarcity of resources will increase immigrants, meaning that more immigrants will come to Europe. There will be then the xenophobic responses to such a immigrants, and then the rise of right-wing populism threatening the democracy. That's something that we're going to talk about. So the threat is not simply about AI. We have these many issues created by crisis of capitalism, crisis of ecology, and crisis of democracy. This is the so-called situation of polycrisis. We have like so many mega threats that we just simply let them go. We're going to really smash this system. That's the Systemsturz is going to occur. But the problem is, I think, those tech giants, like those capitalists, are still talking about this old fantasy of economic growth. We can invest in new green technologies, for example, renewable energies, electric vehicles, whatsoever. They will solve those problems. We can even create new jobs, create better infrastructure, create better society for everyone. Unfortunately, the decoupling of economic growth from the resource and energy usages are not happening fast enough. More massive extraction from the global south is coming, so more colonialism under the name of green capitalism. And this is, I think, find it very paradoxical. Those people celebrating great technologies, including AI, you know, it's like life-changing, and some people like Elon Musk are trying to go to the outer space, and they just had a, you know, the coming back of the shuttle, and we are celebrating this kind of advancement of technology. We have such high capacity of producing so many products to the extent that we can overshoot almost all the planetary boundaries, so we have like gigantic power of production. However, so many people, including the people in the global north like us, are still suffering to just spend a daily life. And then so many people in the global south are suffering from poverty, hunger, and various kinds of disease. So I personally think this is very paradoxical. We have so much capacity, so much great dream technology, but so many problems in reality. Poverty, inequality, ecological crisis. So I think there's something wrong in this system itself, not in the nature of technology necessarily, not in the nature of human beings, but in this system, there's something wrong. And I call it, this is the wrongness of capitalist system. And this is something that we can learn from Karl Marx and Engels, because they are the ones who really criticize fundamentally the logic of infinite capital accumulation, infinite economic growth, which is leading to this mega threat society today.
All right.
Maybe not for the Süddeutsche Zeitung, maybe for the Taz Zeitung, but yeah, or the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung.
Well, your idea of degrowth communism is, well, for the liberal capitalism we are all living in, which is dominating our societies in the West, is not just one provocation, it's actually two provocations. And we need to talk about what you mean with degrowth communism. But first of all, to get to know you a little better and the background of the book and the idea, basically you're a Marx scholar, and you're one of the current editors of the Japanese Marx Engels Werke as well. But how did you find Marx for yourself? You're not that old, it must be.
Yeah, when I entered college, no one was reading Marx anymore. So Marx was almost like a dead dog, right? But it's still like that. When I say, oh, I study Marx and I advocate for communism, that people think it's like crazy. And then I still say, no, just not a communism. It's a degrowth communism to, freak people out. So we just had a backstage conversation about, well, why you use that kind of terminology, because it takes more time to explain and so on. But let me explain again, because I still think that the Marx was quite fascinating, because my last 20 years since I started reading Karl Marx, it was economic crisis of 2007, 2008, and the Fukushima nuclear power disaster, explosion Super-GAU in 2011, and then this is like a pandemic, 2019, and then now we are heading like war in Ukraine and then in Gaza, and then we have this climate ecological breakdown in the 21st century in the Anthropocene. So I think these problems are clearly related to this logic of capitalism, which is characterized by constant expansion and constant profit making. And for the sake of that, it continues to produce what is profitable. It doesn't matter whether people need or not. They just produce so much, whatever that can be sold with higher profit. So they continue to produce, say, one obvious example is private jets that we don't actually need if you think about ecology, because we also don't afford it. But they continue to do that, while many things like medical care, education, and all those kind of important things are really in crisis everywhere, even in the global north. So when I say degrowth, it's not about simply giving up everything, or don't fly so many times, don't eat so much meat, and so on. I mean, it's part of that, but at the same time, it's not simply about austerity and frugality. It's also about rethinking what is really important for our life. Because in capitalism, what's important is profit and capital, right? So that's called capitalism. But in other society or in our life, what's obviously important is love, engagement, democracy, and environment, and so on and so on. But these are the things that are not often counted in this abstract measure of so-called monetary value, right? So you can, increase your GDP by privatizing things, deregulating things, and even, investing in advertisement and spending a lot of budget in the military things and killing people and so on. But these are not bringing progress anymore. So we need to reshift our focus of economy from simply growth to something else like justice, sustainability, and other kind of well-being and so on. This is degrowth or degrowthism, right? And then instead of privatizing and commodifying everything, this is a logic of capitalism, according to Marx, because it's a movement of money, commodity money, but we can have more of decommodified free kind of education, free medical care, free public transportation, free internet, and a different kind of social relationship. Then maybe we can have much more stable, abundant, well-being life, which I call a society based on commons, not on the commodities, but based on commons, which I think can be adequately called communism, because society,
So it's actually more than, it's not communism, but it's commonsism.
Yeah,
right?
but I mean, you can say in that way, but I think this is the logic, I think, what Marx was also following, but our image...
Yeah, where did you find the degrowth Marx? Because
degrowth Marx...
theories on money, on growth.
Yeah, because Marx is often associated with some kind of celebrating the technological development, and it's called a productivist thinker. But he was like that when he was young. But I'm actually the editor of Marx Engels Gesamtausgabe, and then looked at some of his very old notebooks. And then I just found after the nuclear disaster in Fukushima, Marx was just a very naive thinker celebrating maybe nuclear power, or then he's just an asshole. But actually looking at that kind of notebooks that he actually made in very last 10 or 15 years of his life, he was clearly paying attention to the issue of ecology under the name of Stoffwechsel, the metabolism, because he came to recognize those capitalist technology that are used to exploit from humans, today not just workers, but also our daily life. We are all constantly exploited by those, tech gigantic companies. But those technologies are obviously utilized for the sake of exploiting from nature as well. So that will undermine sustainability and natural conditions and so on. Then he became more and more interested in how these two sides of human alienation and the natural destruction are connected, and he became a more eco-socialist degrowth thinker in the end.
From that perspective, in the book, you're very critical about some ideas for a more sustainable economy, like the Green New Deal, geoengineering, and the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. Why is that?
I mean, geoengineering is unpopular everywhere, but some people still think that we can be somehow ecological just by buying Tesla cars. That's what I problematize. If you just buy Tesla and then drive, you're still destroying the environment. I have to be very explicit, so I warn you if you are happy. Because you are not becoming even free. The Tesla is getting all the data from you, so you become like, oh, I'm Tesla owner, I'm free and independent. No, you're just still dependent on or exploited by those Tesla companies. So anyway, but you are also destroying the environment too, so that's very bad. Why? Because all those resources are still quite intensively, exploiting the earth. Lithium, minerals, and all those things are still coming from the global south. I think what's very, brutal about this cruel thing is that we say we're going to invest in green technology, we're going to think about sustainability, we make climate justice, just transition, and so on and so on. But what we are actually doing is still massively extracting the wealth of the global south countries and the environment, and even destroying the people's life, especially among the indigenous people. So that can be very cruel. And if we continue to do this, it's just like a new ecological imperialism or something like that. And I think there is a way, because we need a more global collaboration overcoming the division of global north and south, I think there's only one way, logically. The global north recognize the finiteness of the planet and the resources. That means that we have to share all those resources, meaning that we have to start thinking about reducing or giving up some of the excessive production and consumption. And I think we can have much better mobility without everyone possessing 1 or 2 cars. We can just instead simply invest more in public transportation and other kinds of mobility, including bicycle and so on and so on.
Yes. Would you like to respond?
You were smiling.
Yeah, you were looking very skeptical.
There are so many things to say, but 2 things,
Please.
First of all. I mean, it's not just capitalism. The kind of critique is of human greed, which is much, much older than capitalism. I think many people don't really understand what capitalism means today. They simply think it means greed. And I think it's important to emphasize, and this makes the situation more complicated. For most of history, there was no capitalism, and humans still wrought enormous ecological damage, and still waged wars, and still hate slavery, and still built empires, and still exploited each other. But it was pre-capitalist. The difference was that people thought of the world as a pie of a finite, not a finite, but a pie of a given size. This is the pie, this is the world. If I get a bigger slice, it must come at the expense of somebody else. And this was the engine of so much of violence and exploitation and so forth. The big idea of capitalism in the modern age is that actually we can make the pie bigger and have a win-win situation. That if we cooperate in a certain way, we can make the pie bigger and everybody would have a bigger slice at the same time. So before or even underneath the economic revolution, there was an ethical revolution, which sounds like a very good idea, a very positive idea. Instead of fighting over something limited, let's cooperate to make it bigger. And much of the debate today and for centuries is whether it is working or not. But first we need to understand that this is the debate. And the thing is that almost everybody jumped on this wagon, including maybe not degrowth communism, but kind of more historical communism, jumped on the same wagon. If you ask what is the common ideal of all the governments that existed for the last century or 2 centuries, with all their ideological differences, the one thing they all agree on is growth. The USSR wanted to grow just as much as the USA wanted to grow and brought about even bigger ecological damage. Today, communist China and the capitalist USA, they both are anxious for growth. The Ayatollahs in Iran and the rabbis in Israel, they both want growth. Everybody wants to grow, everybody wants more, and the global south wants growth more than anybody else. They also want not just more cars, but sewage systems, and roads, and schools, and hospitals. And the big question is, how do we provide all that to the people who don't have it right now? How do you convince in a democratic way voters in Western countries, like if we come with these ideas to the American electorate, if Kamala Harris gave this speech, what are the chances that she will be elected on the 5th of November? And there are 2 different, I think, debates to be had. One is the debate about the destination. That I think the type of society that is able to provide people with their real psychological and social needs without destroying the ecological system, that I think should be easy to agree. But in history, the biggest problem is usually not the destination, it's the way there. How do we get from the world of today to such a destination? How do you convince people in democratic countries to vote for such a program. And what makes it most difficult, and this is my last point, is how do we do it fast? Because the world is on fire. And I think that the big paradox is this we need to slow down fast. Mm. How do you slow down fast?
What does the Marxist say?
So one important point is obviously how do we convince people without this kind of coercive measure, because communism is often associated with some kind of authoritarian dictatorship. And when I say, oh, we need ecological transition, it sounds like, then we need communism, it sounds like I'm bringing some kind of ecological dictatorship. But I'm not saying that we need, obviously, some kind of Stalinist measure, which I actually discuss as a climate Maoism, as a one way of dealing with this kind of ecological crisis. The point is, I think, one is, if we just keep doing today's business as usual, we're going to hit into the point where things just simply break down. And that moment, if we don't prepare enough, we really have to be dependent on some kind of authoritarian state power again. We had some symptoms already during the pandemic, right? We didn't prepare. And then we had to lock down, we had to have some kind of very strong state, and maybe China was doing something better because they had a stronger power. And that kind of discussion, suspicious of democracy, came in. And then after that, we had a war, and we had more like many problems. And I think, so we know that we are heading to some kind of a catastrophe, so we have to be prepared. And here's my kind of mental exercise, because we need to change, again, the ethical standards. We had some kind of that kind of transformation from feudalism to capitalism, but also within capitalism, when we abolished slavery, I think that was a moment of really like ethical transformation. I think very beginning, when some people say, oh, we should stop, having slavery, many people thought, oh, you're crazy, you want to lose money, and you want to have blah, blah, blah. But I think it's the same when the Greta Thunberg, a couple of years ago, started saying we should really care about planet and so on. We were suspicious, right? And then there are people like in the end of the 80s, like James Hansen, they were saying that already in the end of the 80s, that the climate crisis is happening because of human activity, we should talk about that, we should change and so on. If we started at that time, we had much more time, and I didn't have to talk about communism and degrowth. But we basically wasted last 30, 40 years, didn't do nothing. So now we need a more urgent action. But luckily, there are some people, especially the young generation, facing to this reality, not about just money and about greed. They are really concerned, and they are starting to act. They're raising voices, and I was actually inspired by them. I also used to, endorsing Green New Deal. I thought it was much easier. It was much more politically feasible. But I realized, okay, do I say something popular and easily accepted by people, and then, maybe some kind of feasibility and so on? But actually, in reality, Green New Deal doesn't also realize decarbonization that is fast enough. The Green New Deal can actually, as I said, reinforce some kind of extractivism in the global south. Green New Deal may fail. And then maybe we should actually stick to even a harder path. But without really saying some kind of pessimism and authoritarian, maybe we can imagine a democratic expansion, because capitalism is really undemocratic, right? If you think about it, democracy is about dialogue. Democracy is about the diversity of values and engagement. In capitalism, we have conformism. We have just thinking about the value. The whole society is directed for the sake of profit making. As long as your activity matches with this, you can write books, you can, do some activities, but if you just want to be some kind of musician, it's very hard because it's not making profit. So maybe in the more democratic society, freed from the constant pressure of economic growth, we can actually satisfy our greed, our desires, and our will for our desire for democracy as well. So it's the same kind of mental exercise, I admit, but at the same time, this kind of resonation, I find it very taking place everywhere, especially among the young generation. And the our value can change overnight. And that's a very inspiring thing. As a philosopher, we play with some concepts by redefining communism, by redefining growth, by redefining what good life is. Maybe some people live in a different way. They act different way. Next 10, 20 years, more and more people will change, and then that will bring about much radical transformation of the social system.
Is that going to work like with the internet as we have now, maybe to bring the connection back to what we were speaking about at the beginning? I mean, with the sort of global society we have today and all the algorithms working in there, how do you envision it? Because it seems to be a global conversation, and not only conversation, but global action that is required there.
So one thing I liked about your book is that we have faster algorithm, faster calculation machines and so on. But who's gonna decide the goal of calculation? We can ask some questions to the AI, and then maybe we get more efficient answer. But as also Yuval talks about this in the book, and I really find it interesting, who's going to decide the goal? AI, we let AI also decide goals? No, right? I think we still have to decide when we ask some questions about future and so on.
But the very important, interesting question there is, these are two very different books, and you're two very different people, because you're some kind of a neo-Marxist. You're definitely not a neo-Marxist. But you agree on, as far as I see, on two things. The one thing is maybe like the notion of growth is bigger than capitalism. The need to grow is bigger. And the other one is that you too want something like a mentality change of the whole world to face all what's coming in the future. But this seems to me like the most difficult things of all, to change the mentality of mankind. And how do you manage this?
First of all, this is what intellectuals have been doing throughout history. This is the job, to change the way that people see the world and change the world that people think. And I think another place that from very different perspectives and with very different ideas we still kind of meet is in the idea of slowing down. Yeah. And of the need for slowing down, but also of this objective difficulty. For things are only going faster and faster. So how do you make them slow down?
But how do you think could this happen? Because the opposite is happening.
The opposite is happening, absolutely.
Right now.
I have one good very idea for the Buchmesse, because I think today, as you warned, we have more and more fake news, and this explosion of new information is not bringing about truth. So I think one day the internet will be useless, because it's full of fake news, and you cannot count on those kind of internet anymore. So it's not a place to find out the new information, right? So people realize, okay, maybe actually books and newspapers are much more useful to find out truth. And this is actually the slow technology by slowing down, and so I think that might be
now we love you even more.
Right?
Yeah. I think that's the communism we can all agree on here. And
at least.
I think it's time for our special guests to come up on stage, please. It's a bit of a longer walk than I thought. So they are Finja Filzinger and Chenoa Brach. They both are students at the Goethe-Universität here in Frankfurt. Chenoa is a student of ethnology, I believe, and Oh, philosophy. Sorry, then I got the wrong information. Okay, philosophy. And Finja is doing a master in Gesellschaftswissenschaften. Sociology.
Yes.
So, yeah. Would you like to begin, Chenoa, or?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, hi. We agreed before that I could begin with my question.
Go ahead.
If you don't mind, because
Not
we
at all.
thought this would make sense. So first I wanted to say I engaged with your books with great interest and excitement also. And yeah, I also felt like alarmed when I read them. And I mean, I know we need to do something, but I felt the books foster that feeling like we all really need to do something. And yeah, we also need stories, and authors like you tell stories. And this is where my question goes. So I felt that you in Nexus tell a rather dark story. Like there are very many notions of a dark future, of AI taking power. And on the opposite, in the other book, Systemsturz, I had the feeling that it really gives us an image of a prosperous future, that how can it be really nice for everyone? And I was wondering, first maybe if you agree, but also which one is more effective to make people change their behaviors, their actions, and yeah, which option is better in cultivating needs for freedom and well-being and solidarity, and yeah, giving hope in the end.
Which one? You mean which book?
No, maybe which way of telling a story, like utopia or dystopia, is maybe the very short question.
Okay.
I see.
Well, I think for me the important thing is, again, if you're talking about slowing down, we also need to intellectually slow down. Not to rush to conclusions too quickly, not to rush to kind of grab the first solution that comes our way, not to kind of ignore the enormous complexity of reality because we are kind of intellectually too hasty. I want to understand it immediately, like in 1 week or in 1 year. And again, this is the paradox of how do you slow down fast. And I don't know how to solve this paradox, but kind of my instinct or my insight is that to put more emphasis on the slow down part than on the fast part. That if the problem is that the world is spinning faster and faster out of control, then trying to solve the problem immediately, like we need to do something big now, this is how we got here. You know, I was just on the way hearing somebody told me this nursery rhyme in English about the old lady who swallowed the fly, and then she swallowed the spider to catch the fly, and then she swallowed the lizard because the spider was there, so she swallowed the lizard to catch the and eventually she died. And this is humanity. That we swallow the fly, and the first thing we think, oh, we swallow, let's we get the spider to get it. And I mean, we've been going that way for thousands of years. So starting with myself, that I also need to kind of intellectually slow down. And this is, again, part of going back to the issue of conversations. When you slow down, you have more time to listen to the other people. With regard to the dystopia, whether to give people hope or to give people kind of the threat, they need both. I mean, if it's just threats, then people feel overwhelmed and hopeless, then they do nothing. If it's just hope, then either they don't see the problem, or they, again, have kind of, they rush to solutions which often create only bigger problems down the road.
Thank you.
So a crucial question is, when will you publish your next book?
I don't know. It will take time.
So rather later than sooner.
Not in the next year.
Go ahead.
Oh, right.
Yeah, do you want to answer also to the question?
Very briefly. But yeah, as Yuval talks about these kind of things in the book, human-like story, story matters and so on. And we had in the French philosophy, postmodern, this kind of end of big history and so on. But I think it was wrong. Now, Silicon Valley people are talking about the big history of AI, and the right-wing populists are talking about kind of big history of, the danger of immigrants and the good old times and so on. I think left-wing, we also need, I'm not sure you are left-wing, but I think the progressive people also need some kind of new big story, which has been lost since the collapse of the Soviet Union. And what I'm trying to do with my book on degrowth communism is sort of try to revive this some kind of utopian imagination, because we are kind of suffering from the loss of big stories, the progressive one. And I'm hoping that this kind of new story that I tell might be some inspiration for younger generation like you.
First of all, thank you so much for your works. I have read it with a lot of interest and passion, and I had a lot of questions that I was talking about with my friends. So also thank you a lot to them for sharing their ideas. I want to come back to our big goal. What is our big goal? Is it now saving planet Earth? I say that right now in that sense. Is it social justice, equality? If we take both of that goals, if that is our top goal, how can we find our way to that goal without speaking about emotions and empathy, which is such an important part of humans? And because Harari, you mentioned slow down intellectual, that led me also now to the question, do we have then more time for emotions? And now I come to my real question, which is, how viable are the concepts you propose, considering that we humans are deeply influenced in our emotional and psychological well-being by wars, social injustice, and societal norms? Is it even possible to achieve sustainable and profound systematic change without addressing psychological and emotional healing and the social well-being of society?
Yeah, I think that's one of the weaknesses of Karl Marx. I think he actually, I'm very honest, right? I'm not like dogmatically saying that Marx explained everything and so on. I point out some of his weakness too. But anyway, I think the weakness is that he analyzes the system. It's dominated by capital and maybe today by AI. And so this kind of the things dominate humans, so it's an inversion. And he analyzes how these kind of things emerge and so on. But he doesn't really talk about that kind of psychological damages. Of course, some part alienation and so on, but I don't really think that kind of dimension is very central for him. And also because my book is influenced by his ideas, it's not necessarily clear. But I have been learning about a lot from the tradition of like ecofeminism. And I think what I now sort of as a philosopher regret is that I focus too much on some kind of reason, rationality, and like logical thinking without paying enough attention to like a body interaction with, nature, with others, and like experiments of love, care, and so on and so on. So I actually started to go into nature with my friends, and I started some a group called Common Forest Japan, and we, started to kind of vitalize the abundant forest together. And this is a very interesting practice, because now I'm not like a university professor just talking about concepts that I have to cut trees and carry stones. And these are the experiences that I'm so humble at. I'm still learning new things, but it's also the practice of creating like a common space together with others, and also regaining the more sensible connection with nature and so on and so on. I think, yes, these kind of like physical experiment accompanied by emotional experiments is really also repairing the society, repairing community, repairing nature. And I think, yeah, in some sense, I'm talking about the big ideas of system transformation. We also have to start locally, maybe small, but that experience brings a lot about new knowledge, new emotion, new ideas that could spread very fast. And I'm hoping that this kind of community will start emerge everywhere. Maybe some readers who, after reading my book and so on. So this is some movement that we can sort of, from the bottom, create fast but slowly.
I think first we need to acknowledge the achievements of humankind, because again, this is essential for having any kind of hope that we can do something on a major level. And you think, for instance, about with all the wars, with all the problems of the early 21st century, this is the first time in history that the average government expenditure on healthcare is bigger than on the military. For most of history, government spent more than 50% of the budget on the military. In the early 21st century, it was down to 7% compared to 10% spent on healthcare. And this was not a miracle or a change in the laws of nature. It was, ultimately, it goes down to institutions and bureaucracies. I think bureaucracy is one of the unsung heroes of human history, doesn't get enough credit for what it does. Maybe I'll end with a story, because we are a storytelling animal. So I'll end with a story about the deep state. You know, lots of people today are afraid of the deep state and hate the deep state. When I hear about the deep state, I immediately think about the sewage system, which is the deep state. You go to the toilet, you do your thing, you flush it down. Where does it go? It goes into the deep state. It goes into this subterranean system of dark tunnels and pumps under our houses and streets and neighborhoods that keeps us alive. And it starts, one of the key moments in the history of the sewage system was in the middle of the 19th century in London, which was the biggest and most dirty city in the world, full of diseases and epidemics, lots of cholera epidemics. And there was a cholera epidemic. People were dying. And there was this hero, Jon Snow, not the one from Games of Thrones, but a real Jon Snow, who was a doctor and a bureaucrat. And he did what bureaucrats do. He made lists. He went around London, and any time he heard about somebody sick or dead from cholera, he asked where did they get their water from? Because he suspected the problem was in the water. And he made these long, long lists of all the people, and when they drank from here and they drank from there. And he discovered that almost all the people who got sick with cholera, they had at least one zip of water from the Broad Street pump today in Soho. And he convinced the city municipality, the officials, to disable the pump, and the epidemic stopped. And then they investigated further. They discovered that the well was dug less than a meter away from a cesspit. And water from the cesspit were just sipping into the drinking water, and people were drinking this and becoming sick. And this was one of the major breakthroughs in modern epidemiology, not just about cholera, but generally speaking about what are epidemics and what is causing them, which led eventually to the establishment of sewage systems, not just in London, but throughout the world, which saves millions of lives. And today, if you want to dig a well or a cesspit in London, you have to fill so many forms. and get so many permits from the municipality and from this department and from that department, and it works. It saved people's lives. So just one thought for the end, really about that if we are talking about changing big institutions, like not my personal life, but to change big systems, ultimately the only way is it starts with ideas and books and emotions, but it has to be eventually translated into bureaucracies, because only bureaucracies really manage to eventually implement the change in the world.
That's a very interesting point, considering that most people hate bureaucracies.
Yeah, so
but that's what you want to leave us with.
Yes.
And Kohei, would you agree?
Well, yes and no, but I have to think again. But yeah, I think one last thing I wanted to add is like maybe we are exaggerating the danger of AI. I mean, last year we had so much discussion about ChatGPT and so on. But after 1 year, what we had is actually just almost like an adult toy, right? We just like play, ask some stupid questions, and get answers.
Just won the Nobel Prize.
Yeah, true. But but that doesn't mean that it's a great invention. And then the problem that I want to actually emphasize is that we have today like digital theater, which is like Netflix. We have digital library, which is Amazon Kindle. We have digital post office, which is Google email. And then maybe we have some kind of new thing with the AI, ChatGPT, and so on. But our reality, real life, is not changing at all. In the sense that Keynes, 100 years ago, it's a famous one, and by 2030, we would work only like 15 hours per week. But we are 2024 now, still working like 40, 50 in Japan, like 60 hours per week. It's crazy. And why do we have to work so hard? Why? So in a sense, the technology is not really bringing any progress to us. But I still don't say, but it's not because technology is not really making any progress. But I think in this capitalist society, technologies are not used in a way that they can really emancipate us. They only subjugate us to the logic of capital. I think so when we transform the social relations, we have a different kind of relationship with technology, more democratic one, and we have more different relationship to our own time, and then maybe that leads to some kind of a democratic society as well. So let's hope that we can change society, protect the environment, and then bring some justice to this divided world.
I would just say that I agree that the technology itself doesn't guarantee anything. Ultimately, it depends on what the humans do with it, and again, what kind of institutions we build to make sure that the technology is used for good and not for ill. I do think that it is changing the world at tremendous speed. I mean, again, it's not a joke. It really just won the Nobel Prize in chemistry. The prize was given to the developers of AlphaFold, which transformed the world of chemistry and likely to transform the world of medicine by solving this huge and seemingly insurmountable problem of how to fold proteins. And who knows how many years before AlphaBook wins the Nobel Prize in Literature.
Maybe we should bet now.
So maybe we can say, because we are reaching the end now, that I was not expecting to get so much hope from you. At the same time, so much dystopian thoughts. So maybe that's a good reason to... it's a good thing that people like you who think deeply about all this are still happy people.
Yeah, we don't have to end with hope or dystopia. We just have space to think about things.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here and giving us new ways to think about different things, including bureaucracy, feelings, Thank you to you all for being here and being such a good audience, and yeah, enjoy slowing down fast or slowly. And good night.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.